Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Weil. This is the JupyterLab weekly call for Wednesday, March 13th, 2021. Including myself, we have 9 people on the call. Thanks so much for joining. We have an agenda with a couple of items on it. Um, I can start us off. There is an issue that I opened about the JupyterLab 3 end of maintenance, which for anyone not familiar, we now have a policy of maintaining a major version until 1 year after the following major version's first general release. So JupyterLab 4.0.0 came out on May 15th of last year, which means that JupyterLab 3 will officially reach end of maintenance on May 15th of this year. As a one-time exception, we're going to keep doing critical patch releases through the end of this year for Lab 3, but we're trying to get the word out to, if you're on Lab 3, you really need to start upgrading soon. I opened this issue with the intention of pinning it to the repository. The problem is that we already have 3 issues, which is the maximum, pinned to the repository. We have unable to use multiple characters with international keyboards, 4.2 release plan, and extension compatibility with JupyterLab 4.0. And I haven't unpinned any of them. I can, but I was curious whether we should pin the end of maintenance issue, and if so, which one should it displace? We talked about this briefly. Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I think we only need to pick one. I don't know which one we consider less important.
I just make an executive decision and then link to the other two to preserve the records, I guess, or to make it easier to navigate.
I feel like the 4.2 release plan is something that is ongoing. The
It is.
international keyboard issue affects a lot of our folks, particularly in Europe, where people are using non-English keyboard layouts.
So maybe the last one,
The
the
extension
extension compatibility.
compatibility. This is still very important. Mike is on the call, I believe. Mike, would you be okay with us unpinning 14.590, the extension compatibility with Lab 4, and in
Absolutely.
favor of the more time-sensitive Lab 3 issue?
Yep, we can always pin it back once once we reach the end of life or we close the other issue.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. I will pin this other issue that is done. And I'll drop a link into the comments for this other one. That's all I have. Eric is next up.
Yeah, so Jason brought this issue up in the meeting earlier today. Someone posted a really nice issue, kind of documenting challenges they had with the extension tutorial, and I think we talk about this a lot, but I'll drop a link in the chat. But this person basically says the tutorial is not written for novices. They're like, so you're using iCommand palette in the code, and you're using widget, and you're using Jupyter front end plugin, and they're talking about how like the code is in there, but none of the context isn't explained. These things aren't explained in detail. It's missing information and context. And I think like this is a good guidepost issue, I think, for the documentation in general. I just wanted to bring it up because I want everyone to be hopefully keeping this kind of a thing in mind. If you're writing docs, and if you're making improvements to docs, I think we see these issues and challenges a lot. So it's nice to see someone write it up and describe it well. But yeah, like always important to keep novices in mind, and not assume prior knowledge, and try to not that we should be explaining TypeScript to people, but if we can make call out boxes and if we can provide extra information in a way that fits with the structure and flow of the document in a way that's not disruptive, then we should totally be doing that as much as we can.
Mike has his hand up.
Yeah, when I read this issue, my first thought was that there has been a lot of work done by Eric and others to explain some of these concepts. The thing that's missing, I believe, is the fundamental feature of the web, which is hyperlinks and linking from the tutorial to the places where these terms are explained, because I personally don't think that adding more text to the tutorial would make it better.
I totally do.
It would make it longer and harder to follow.
So I think part of the tutorial, I don't think you have to mainline all of this information in the main document, but if we can, at the very least, you can split things into callout boxes so they don't disrupt the flow of the document and add more information in a way that's going to kind of inundate someone with a wall of text. I think you can make callout boxes, or you can, as you pointed out, we can hyperlink and do deeper page hierarchies. But to your point, I really do agree that we're like in need of a better structure and making some of this information more discoverable. That is like kind of the thought process behind me writing that plugin system document, because we have kind of a snippet wall of text in the original extension dev article, but it speaks at a high level and doesn't include actionable working code samples and stuff. So like, I think what's in order is a kind of a rewrite and restructuring of the main extension developer document. And I've been talking about that a little bit, but that's something that I would love to do. Don't know if anyone has thoughts about that.
I think 10-minute tutorial videos are pretty valuable, but the trouble is stuff moves and it's really hard to keep those up to date. But
Yeah.
some of the most instructive, like soft landings for me in ecosystems have been follow alongs like that.
Yeah.
But that's another thing to maintain, and that's difficult. And just even producing the first one is hard.
Yeah, producing a 10-minute video is deceptively complicated.
Yeah.
It can be rewarding, but it takes time and it takes knowledge and potentially even like good quality equipment and software. But I've seen, everybody has their preferred style. Some people like watching a video. Personally,
Yeah,
I prefer having like a good written document, but everyone
I
has
do
their own
too.
preference.
Yeah, I do too. The videos, it's an interesting idea. Yeah, and that's something, like maybe I'm going to write a note about that, because we should be thinking about that for the docs working group. But I mean, what immediately comes to mind for me, like I kind of mentioned, is I would really like to, as a first step, I would like to break up and restructure the extension dev page. So we have discrete documents that focus on different pieces of information. So we don't need the entire encyclopedia in that page. I think we need to, I would love to do a rewrite where we can refactor some of that information to give people broad overviews, and then in each section kind of deep link into more information about whatever particular topic is. So that the plugin system is a good example, but I think there are a lot of other things that you could do that with. And that's going to produce a shorter main document that will produce more focused secondary documents that are easier to read, have less content, and are more digestible.
So that's
Well-
that's exactly the main motivation that we had when we started the extension examples repo. You know, that the separate GitHub repository with examples.
I
Like-
think the extension examples is great. And
Yeah,
I think
because-
like to your point, there is some explanatory text in each of those.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly the observation, and I think it's even stated in the README somewhere that maybe at the very end, something like it was more like, yeah, developing by examples, like the kind of the main guideline for this repo.
I
And
think
if you look at this, there is something like a hello world, and then you have like working with widgets, and
Yeah.
it's very well, you know, that you have clear sections. So maybe I'm wondering if there is something we could do with these materials, because there is already a lot of content there. So maybe that means integrating that more into the main JupyterLab documentation, or just linking to it and people just go there.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, integrating the examples more fully, yeah, would be great. I also really think still, I still think kind of the examples kind of serve certain functions, right? I think we still I think need to expand the kind of big picture descriptive articles, design documents, and those kind of things, because I think like examples are important. But yeah, like I still think we are missing in a lot of ways these like high level design documents and overviews and descriptive things that explain to people, this is how this thing was designed and this is how we intend for you to use it, so that someone doesn't have to infer reasoning by reading through the entire code base. You know what I mean?
Do you have like a concrete example of something that is currently missing?
I think it's, I don't know. I think you can pull examples from that issue in the chat there.
Which issue?
Let me link it again. So yeah, here's that link that's in the chat now. And you know, that like in here they mentioned Jupyter front-end plugin has attributes in it. In the code, we can see ID, description, auto start, requires, and activate. There's no mention of where they're documented. Where can I learn more about what they do? And we do have information about that in the main extension dev document. But which is the plugins reusing each other, or reusing something like that. It's called something like that. There's a section that it kind of goes into some detail there, but it's I think that's a good example of where we can provide kind of like which the plugin system endeavors to do, right? We have that plugin system. I have split off that second plugin system document. It endeavors to do that. It says, this is how this was designed to be used. It is a type of dependency injection pattern, and this in a really granular way is how it works. And here's example code and example projects, and it interlinks to the examples. So I don't know. I think that's a good general that's a good general example. I think illustrates the point.
Yeah, I was looking again at the extension tutorial, and I mean, if you take that sentence that the person wrote in the issue, saying that in the code we can see ID, description, auto start, requires, and activate, though there is no mention of where they are documented. They are actually described
they are
in the
they're in the extension dev document. There's a section, and I think a lot of that context is missing. So
wait, what do you mean is missing?
let me pull it up,
because I mean these are at least mentioned in the tutorial.
Yeah, they think they are, right? So like, let me find the section we're talking about here.
Again, it really depends on like what we want to achieve with this tutorial, because for sure you could explain everything, like every single line of code, but
Yeah, I
then
don't think we need to do that either. Like, we don't have to explain every single line of code down to the binaries of every dependency, right? We don't have to do every single atom of everything, but
but then
I think
if we start,
we can make smart decisions about where to break things apart. High level section here and a deep link to an expanded page.
which is
And
why I think
and I was going to say also just kind of like we were talking about, providing, explaining to someone, this is how this thing was designed to be used. This is the thinking behind it. This is how you should use it. Potentially, this is a suggestion of how to use it because this is how it was meant to be used. And I think that's the
So-
piece. That's the piece I think that is we're missing. We're missing that layer of this is how this is intended to work, which is really so important to being able to use tools effectively. Darian.
I'm sorry. So yeah, sorry to interrupt. Darian has his hand raised.
We have a way, whether it's Jupyter Lite or some other library out there, to take an example plugin and have all of the tokens of that code have LSP and have like IDE like features, but embedded in the web page. So you could literally hover over iCommand palette and know what it is, and you can even maybe embed the JupyterLab, the inspector that we have, something like that. So wherever your cursor lands, that do we have the capacity to do that? Because that doesn't need to be updated every time. It's the same exact burden of updating the example extensions, but you don't have to like install it. You don't have to have your environment working. You don't have to have any of that, but you get the benefit of being inside an IDE for understanding what those lines mean without taking up more walls of text.
That's like really interesting.
So there is
what would be,
plugin playground.
I was going to say, what would be nice is, and this is potentially something we could do in Docs working group, but you could make an extension, hopefully make an extension that does some of that functionality, and then we could put it into JupyterLite and integrate it into the Docs potentially. That's a really interesting idea. I'm going to make a note about, I'll make an issue about that for Docs working group.
We have already something like this. It's called the plugin playground. It's under the lab org. It's its own.
What was that name? Sorry, what was that name again?
It's called the JupyterLab plugin playground. So you go to JupyterLab, and then you can make your extension from JupyterLab itself. I don't think it's updated for JupyterLab 4, unfortunately, but at some point Mike put some LSP on the binder. So you go on binder, and at least you will get completions when you write your TypeScript, which is quite useful. And then you get all of the nice things from an IDE, but you don't have to install anything locally. And to get something like this in JupyterLite, I guess it could work. I'm not sure about the LSP part because, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if there's some free, like, pre-existing thing. So I don't know what Sphinx. Oh, there you go. So what Mike is talking about, like, some of this stuff is better as UI than it is as documented text on the screen, I guess is what I mean. So what's going on
Yeah.
here?
If I have if I have it correct, right? I mean, you're envisioning, right? Someone has, well, I guess someone has, yeah, I wonder how this would work actually, but someone's hovering over iCommand palette and says, this holds when you hit, an explanatory text that comes from the documentation, directly from the documentation, a little hover box. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we write some component that or we use, maybe not even write, some component that just does this for free. So what we're actually updating each time is just that example stuff. And as long as we give it reference to a full actual functioning environment where that code can be embedded, it can pre-populate all the things and create a static bundle, hopefully, so that you're not bringing in that universe every time you load a docs page, because it already knows it's a deterministic quantity of information, because there's only so many tokens of text in that code snippet that it has to populate for you, and it does it. I don't know whether this exists, but it seems doable, and it seems like it would be really more informative with roughly the same quantity of real estate.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
Thanks. I mean, clearly it's not my idea since somebody's implemented it, but thanks.
So if you go to the mist parser reference roles link that I posted, and you hover over the cross references, you will see that exactly this kind of pop-up like on Wikipedia, which adds the doc string and link to the source, etc. So that's all that is quite easily possible. It's just a matter of someone making a pull request to make it happen.
So I'm familiar with linking code with your Sphinx docs. How do we envision, so if we're talking about like developing TypeScript, writing extensions, like how is there a way we could do that in AUI? Because I mean, I'm thinking of JupyterLab, which is going to be.
So I wasn't imagining the full, here you've landed in the plugin playground experience. I was imagining more, you get the level of support you would if you're in a Jupyter notebook cell and you shift tab, you read about this thing, and you get LSP on top of that. But no, not more than that. Like more than that is basically updating the playground, which is cool, but like some people are just there to consume, not there to actually run the code.
So on the plugin playground front, it would be nice to allow even better experience, and we can do that. One of the missing bits is lack of schema for commands, for example. We now have an auto-generated list of commands that we can present to the user. So there are like these things which are JupyterLab specific, but are and wouldn't be suggested by an LSP server. So these are tokens, these are commands, and plugins. And we, for the perfect plugin playground experience, we would have some kind of UI which presents you with a choice of tokens, like use this token to do whatever this token does, and inserts a snippet to import it when you press on it in the side panel or something. But I guess that's kind of different topic from the documentation itself.
Yeah, so I guess, so what we have already with the extension examples repo is, for example, if you start from the hello world, at the very end, you get some going further section, and you get also these sections on some other themes like signals or the common palette. So at least you have some kind of path for someone who wants to write an extension, and maybe we could just try to iterate on that at least and see where it leads us as an alternative to the extension tutorial. If the extension tutorial is too much text for someone to know to grasp, so at least they have the opportunity to stop at a given step maybe more easily, so that kind of resuming this series of tutorials when they want. And this repo is also quite useful because then there are like the code snippets that are linked from the README, and you can just copy paste them and just adjust what you would like to do. So it's sometimes useful. Let's say you want to add something to the common palette, just go there, copy, and then paste.
You're talking about linking. So you're talking about linking, linking API docs and linking examples into the tutorial, just integrating that in more.
No, I'm talking about the main issue you brought up in the beginning, like someone being lost on the extension tutorial. I'm just saying that we have something we could work on already, which is the extension examples repo.
Yeah.
Because this extension examples repo is like a tutorial. It just focuses on different topics, different extension points in lab.
Yeah.
That's it. And maybe that's already a good enough improvement to the docs. We can do without too much effort because it's already there.
Yeah. So I at some point in the future, I will probably be endeavoring to restructure and refactor the main extension dev page. So yeah, like these are really good points. We have a lot of existing resources in different places, and they can just, a lot of work can be done just by integrating what's already there in different places. So yeah, linking API docs in, linking extension examples in more. And yeah, like the potential of doing something interactive and using UI to do it. Yeah, these are all like, these are really good. So that's a challenge for me, Mike. So it's tough. So we talk sometimes about developer experience, or sometimes we talk about contributor experience, right? And like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think about the possibility of like, if I were to undertake rewriting the main extension dev page, right, and restructuring it, that's like a huge job that needs to be kind of done holistically, but then like splitting that up into a bunch of sub issues, then I think is going to make the experience of doing that even harder, because you have multiple PRs in multiple places, and it logistically becomes more like heavier to do on top of what is already like a large task. So I don't know how to, I don't know how I don't know how I feel about that, right? I kind of like, I feel this in different places too, right? I mean, we're open source and I love that, and people can make suggestions, which is great. But then I think, right, like how do we make all of our processes less burdensome for the person who is contributing? And like, that is a thing that I wonder about, especially in relation to this big thing that we're talking about. Because I want to do the work, right? I would love to sit down to take however many weeks and weeks it takes to cut this document apart, refactor the small portions, link to more detailed sub pages that are focused, and like, I would love to do that work, but then I don't know. How do you guys, does anyone have thoughts about that?
I mean, there's a resource issue, right? Like, it's hard. It takes time. It takes editing. There's a lot, right? Like, I recently learned to use Expo for a technology I've never used before. Learn React Native, right? And like, first thing I do, I type in like 1 or 2 commands, and there's a QR code inside my terminal. I pull out my phone, I scan the QR code, and I've got like a running native app on my phone. That is a much more sophisticated and difficult stack than Jupyter. But our landing, our on-ramp is much harder. But you know, we're not Meta, right? We can't pay for that. But I mean, there are really good experiences available, and I think they take a lot of effort and resources.
Maybe so. In regards to this issue, right? Like refactoring the extension dev page, maybe. I guess then, if we're talking about trying to break it up into small incremental PRs, then I guess what I would probably want to do is make a master PR and then have sub issues.
Do you mean master issue and
A master issue, yeah, master issue.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. So one issue with children issues, and like,
it's definitely good for planning if that helps you. I'm just worried that if you create a very big pull request, which will take a lot of time to review, it will result in more frustration from the point of view of the reviewer and yourself, because you will need to rebase it constantly, and it will be a pain for everyone.
Yeah.
So if possible, I would suggest to try to break it up into smaller chunks of work, and that will, I think, make everyone happy. It will make reviewers happy, because they won't have to screen through thousands lines of English changes, and it will make you happy because your changes will be merged sooner rather than later, etc. And then there are many benefits of using like incremental iteration rather than creating a huge pull request, which we often struggle potentially more here in open source than in some companies who can actually pay someone to review and spend the entire day reading a single pull request.
I think like something I think about a lot is there's kind of a tension between, right, like Jupyter itself is split up into a bunch of different sub projects, and they all have their own governance and structures, which empowers everyone to kind of like make progress independently. But like, I think this is like another sort of similar kind of example where I think there's a tension between doing something that is doing something holistic and at a high level where many things follow certain principles or follow a certain plan. I think about this a lot, how these are kind of in tension, right? Like there's the goal to want to break it up so that the reviewers are not inundated with too much work. I get my stuff merged more quickly. It feels like a tension to me where, some of this, if there's many pieces that are part of a bigger holistic effort, like I think, I mean, it feels like something that's in tension. So for this issue, it's like having a coherent plan for all of this work. And then it's trying to get that holistic vision implemented across a bunch of different PRs. And I think like this is why we created the docs working group, but like it's often, I find it really hard to accomplish things across multiple sub projects or at the Jupyter wide level. yeah, it feels like a tension to me, that like it's a difficult thing to deal with. But yeah, I think about that a lot because it has a bearing on contributor experience and people being able to get their work in and have a good time doing it. And to your point, making the experience for viewers pleasant as well. It's like, I don't know, these are hard. They're hard. I don't know how to solve a lot of these things, but I think about them a lot. Anyway, thanks for all of the suggestions.
Hey, I had a couple of ideas just on the level of ideas. So I wanted to share them about like the tutorial, and I understand that like implementation is a whole separate beast. So yeah, we'll just proceed with that. So first of all, first one is I'm trying to remember my experience with using like tutorials and tutorial extension, and it might be nice to add like a server part, right? Like a custom server implementation to some extension. That would be nice. I remember it was really confusing to me. Like, okay, here's how I can implement JupyterLab side, but what about server side if I want like custom server extension implementation bundled with my front end extension?
Yeah.
And the second one is we now have a UI library, right? That Fred developed, and some other people. Sorry, I don't know who. And it would be nice to encourage. First of all, it's easier to use UI library, and then it would be nice to encourage new people coming into JupyterLab to use the UI library because it's easier and because like it would be nice to start using it. So yeah,
It's UI toolkit, right?
yeah.
That's in core now, isn't it? That's been merged.
As far as I understand, yes.
Yeah.
It's not in our organization yet. I think
Okay.
the transfer never happened, but I do agree, Andrew, that it would be good to mention, and it would be good to add a tutorial section or maybe a new tutorial for that. It's just that we need to be mindful that what seems easy in the terms of I want a nice button and I get that for free is not necessarily easy because of the stack which is used, because it's using web components, because it's using Shadow DOM potentially. I'm not sure whether it's using Shadow DOM, but it's using advanced CSS features to style these things. And then if folks start straight away and try to customize that, they will run into a wall. So it's easy on one hand, but on the other, it's not a panacea. It's has some downsides as well.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't used it, so I based my experience, like my assumptions on the experience with something like Material UI, so that's a really good point.
To your point about like a custom server extension with your like front end lab extension, I think this is a good example of where we can tie and link and interlink between sub-projects better. Because yeah, I mean, there's some of the stuff we have some of this information is like, I think the extension app, the server extension app, I think is explained on the server documentation site, right? But then it would be good to have a deeper and more comprehensive interlinking between the JupyterLab docs and server docs. And I think that kind of just goes toward that issue of coordinating across multiple projects, which is kind of emergently just a difficult thing based on how things are structured.
So just so you know, there is also an example on the extension examples repo about making a server extension. And it does link to the server documentation. Mentions the very, very basic you need to know about server extensions so that it works with the lab.
Okay,
It's
cool.
already there.
I also don't know whether, Andrew, when you started, whether that was already the case, but currently the extension template, which I think is linked in the tutorial, allows you to create a server extension so that there is a wizard you go through and answer yes or no. And if you answer yes to the server, it will pre-populate an example extension with a server part as well. So that's possibly covered. Maybe it's not linked. Maybe there is not enough visibility for the templates and the extension examples. And I think that one part that is very much missing in the documentation is like frequently asked questions. And maybe tutorial should have its own section about that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, extra feedback. Really appreciated. Like I said, I'm expecting to do a bunch of docs work in the future, and yeah, I just will like appreciate everybody's help trying to I guess pull it all together. There's a lot of stuff that I just don't know. So yeah, you'll probably see a lot of work toward that in the future. So yeah, I'm going to try to be using all of these suggestions while I'm doing that.
Okay. We don't have a whole lot of time left in the hour, but we do have a few other things on the agenda. Mike has some pull requests to talk about.
Right. So there is now a pull request that I promised last week, which implements Workspaces UI, and it's ready for review. The CI is failing because we are adding new Workspaces package. There are some things that advanced contributors might want to review regarding like what is the naming of the commands and the implementation details, but in general, I think that the UI changes are rather uncontroversial because they implement the mockups provided by Isabella, which were under discussion for a very long time, and I tried to follow as much as possible the dialogues, etc. This could later be moved to other UI components if we decide to have a main area widget, but the logic and the implementation will be there once this pull request is merged, so it will be easier. And there is a list of workspaces in the sidebar. There is a GIF in the pull request if you want to see how it looks like. There is also a snapshot in the UI tests. So yeah.
So that
any
Workspaces tab is new, right? In the left sidebar.
No, the section with workspaces is new. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
And I'm really happy that we managed to compress the file menu, because there were 2 items for workspaces and that menu was getting pretty long already. And now by having a sub menu with all the workspace related items, it gets like 1 item less in the top level file menu. And it's still too long, but yeah. So I've dropped the link in the chat if anyone is willing to review or provide feedback, that would be amazing. My other pull request that I wanted to quickly mention is a pull request which tries to fix the situation with keyboard not working correctly on compact layouts where shortcuts interfere with symbols typed by users, and we tried to merge and release a version of that pull request in JupyterLab 4.13, but I reverted it because it had too many side effects related to prevent default not working, and this new pull request builds on proposed changes to Lumino. These are not necessarily so straightforward. So like I really appreciate review because I'm like, this is what is needed to make it work. That might not be the best approach, but this is an approach which will work and will fix the problem that many users are facing right now. So I think this is the right way forward, but yeah, really, folks, please have a look, and if you don't have time to test that, just leave your comment. What do you think about the APIs? And we can take it and we can make another release with these things in, and worst case scenario, we'll revert that the next day. And the final pull request is not mine, that's Fred's pull request. We discussed that previously, and it will enable customization of how cells are executed. There is one final question, whether that new plugin, that iCell executor, should be specific to notebook and only be able to execute notebook cells, or whether we should also take advantage of the console cells being very similar to the notebook cells. In fact, they inherit from the same class, and make this token support executing both, whether that by having two different methods or by refactoring the logic so that it works whatever kind of a cell is provided, potentially with some conditionals. So I do not have a strong opinion here, but if you do, please leave a comment so that we can move forward with one solution or the other. That's it from me.
To the point you made to me, Mike, about like a lot of these PRs, right? Some of these PRs you're submitting, I don't have expertise in the code base, but I'm going to try to be contributing more toward PR reviews from other aspects, maybe like, as you pointed out, use the extension or use the code and then provide feedback up from a user experience. So for anybody else on the call who needs to hear, like, try to contribute to the PR, you don't have to be an expert. Thank you, Mike, for pointing that out, and I'm going to try to be doing more of that myself.
Yeah, just to point out, in the Workspaces UI, there are changes to the docs, and this can be reviewed by absolutely anybody who speaks English. So that's, yeah, one encouragement.
All right, we are just about at the top of the hour. Does anyone have any other topics they want to discuss on the record?
I guess there's one
Go
thing there's one thing I could mention. I'm going to drop this in the chat. So here's a link to the Docs Working Group Guidebook. So we have we've written down and adopted this this concept of moots. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of bring up to everybody here the plan. So the idea of moots for the Docs Working Group is that we gather expert core developers such as you know, yourselves, all the people on this call. So I think long story short, we want to basically schedule meetings and sessions with experts like you guys so that we can capture a bunch of additional documentation and notes and design guidelines and other things. So yeah, we want to eventually start doing some of these moots where we can gather you guys together and record information about different things. So I guess kind of hopefully everybody is open to that idea.
All right. Any other topics on the record? I know we're just past the top of the hour. All right, hearing none, I will stop the recording. Brace yourselves.